Hey viewers, welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into another mysterious disappearance. This time, it's the case of Brianna Denison. Stay with us as we uncover the details and explore what really happened. Brianna Denison was born on March 29, 1988. She was the older sister to her brother, Brighton, and daughter to Jeff and Bridget Denison. After graduating from Reno High School in 2006, she enrolled in Santa Barbara City College, where she majored in child psychology. Brianna spent most of her childhood in Reno, Nevada, occasionally visiting Mendocino, California, where her mother was originally from. Despite her young age, she was extremely well-traveled, having been to Austria, Egypt, France, Hungary, Italy, Jamaica, Japan, and Mexico. She even studied in Rome for a year. Brianna's exposure to different places and cultures enabled her to connect with people from diverse backgrounds. Although Brianna was easygoing by nature, she was also very concerned with security from an early age. Even so, her prudence and caution didn't spare her from the tragic events that soon unfolded. In January 2008, Brianna returned home to Reno on a week-long winter break from college. She had made plans to enjoy the SWAT 72 snowboarding festival with friends and was eagerly looking forward to the Saturday night events on January 19, 2008. Brianna gave her mother a list of events she was going to that night and informed her that she would be spending the night at her friend KT Hunter's house, near the University of Nevada, Reno, or UNR. After talking to her mother, Brianna headed out to the festival along with KT and one of KT's housemates. After the SWAT events, Brianna and KT went to Mel's Diner in the Sands Regency Casino Hotel for a late-night breakfast. They were accompanied by 4 male friends who later dropped them off at KT's house at about 4 a.m. on January 20, 2008. KT's housemate had already gone home several hours earlier and was asleep in her room. Because KT shared her room with another housemate, Brianna decided to sleep on the leather sofa in the living room. She wanted to text her boyfriend anyway, and maybe even call him, because they were fighting at the time. The sofa was comfortable enough, and many guests had slept there before. However, the only barrier to the outside was the glass-paneled front door, which meant that anyone sleeping there was clearly visible to anyone walking by. Furthermore, the door was usually left unlocked to allow anyone entry in case they came home late and didn't have their keys. For security, KT and the other residents simply locked their individual bedroom doors. It was kind of like a hotel, one resident recalled. We'd all lock our individual doors, but the living room was kind of just the lobby that you just kind of left unlocked in case someone forgot their keys. Before going to bed, KT gave Brianna a pillow and a couple of blankets. She then went upstairs with her dog and locked her bedroom door behind her. Her last words were, "If you need anything, just come in my room." About 5 hours later, KT woke up to find Brianna gone. Thinking that she might have moved to one of the upstairs bedrooms, KT thought nothing of it and began making breakfast. When Brianna still hadn't come down after about an hour, she began knocking on the bedroom doors. To her surprise, Brianna wasn't upstairs or anywhere in the house. Making matters worse, her cell phone, purse, clothes, and shoes were still in the living room, right where she left them earlier that morning. KT's worry turned into panic when she also noticed a spot of blood on the pillow she'd given Brianna. It was then that KT called Brianna's mother, Bridget, and told her that she was nowhere to be found. Bridget immediately drove to the house, while KT called 911. Detectives from the Reno Police Department arrived shortly and began to assess the scene. As soon as they saw the bloodstain, detectives knew that Brianna didn't leave the house voluntarily. They immediately sent samples to a laboratory, where it was confirmed that the blood was hers. Investigators also found bite marks on the pillow, which suggested that it had been forcefully shoved into her face. KT told police that she didn't hear anything unusual after she had gone to bed. Her dog also didn't bark all night. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry or apparent signs of a struggle apart from the bloodstain. KT did notice that one of the blankets she'd given Brianna was lying on the kitchen floor, about 6 feet from the sofa. Upon noticing more bloodstains on this blanket, detectives inspected the path leading from the living room to the kitchen. It was then that they discovered a key piece of evidence. We were able to get a touch DNA profile off the rear doorknob of the residence. Touch DNA, otherwise known as trace DNA, is a forensic method wherein investigators can use even a small sample to create a DNA profile. Such samples can be as small as skin cells left after touching an object, which, in this case, was the doorknob of the back door. Because the DNA didn't match any of the residents, police suspected that it belonged to the person who had taken Brianna. This suggested that whoever took her might have carried her out the back entrance of the house. A closer inspection of her pillow also revealed 3 distinct bloodstains along with mascara smudges. One of the bloodstains also contained saliva and mucus, further emphasizing the possibility that Brianna had been smothered. Forensic pathologists later confirmed that the pillow had been pressed hard against the missing woman's face. They also suspected that she was bleeding from the mouth or nose during the attack. With no suspects to compare the DNA against, detectives looked into who might have had a motive to abduct Brianna. KT had told them that Brianna was arguing with her boyfriend the day before and was, in fact, texting him when KT left her downstairs. The police quickly obtained Brianna's phone records and confirmed that she had exchanged several text messages with her boyfriend in the early morning hours of January 20th, just before she disappeared. But the police immediately ruled out her boyfriend as a suspect as he was living in Oregon. In fact, he hadn't been anywhere near Nevada at the time of Brianna's disappearance. The DNA collected at the scene also didn't match anyone in the police's database. And so, with no other suspects left, the Reno PD launched a thorough search for the missing young woman. Over the next several days, search teams, canine officers, and helicopter crews combed the vicinity of UNR and the nearby hills. Patrol officers also went door to door trying to find leads on Brianna's disappearance, all to no avail. As the days passed, the police knew they were running out of time. The chances of a missing person being found alive dropped sharply after the first 24 to 36 hours. In desperation, they expanded their search to include the Truckee River at the center of town and the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. After several days with still no sign of Brianna, the community came together to join in the search. Hundreds of volunteers gathered daily at a makeshift search operations center in a town casino. Even the governor's wife, Dawn Gibbons, joined the effort. Finally, on February 15, 2008, the Denison family's worst fears were confirmed. The lifeless body of Brianna was found in a grassy area near a business park in South Reno, about 8 miles from KT Hunter's house. The autopsy report revealed that the victim had been strangled. The area where she was found had been covered in snow previously, which led police to suspect that she had been there for at least a week. A pair of garments were collected from the scene, though they didn't belong to Brianna. Instead, it contained 2 DNA profiles, one from an unknown female and the other matching the male DNA sample collected from KT Hunter's house. In light of this discovery, police also ran the male DNA into their database and uncovered that it matched those taken from 2 other incidents, both of which occurred before Brianna's disappearance. With this, authorities realized that a serial attacker was loose on the streets of Reno. More alarmingly, this perpetrator had now gone a step further to commit murder. While investigating Brianna Denison's case, detectives examined similar crimes targeting college-aged women in the area. One particular incident involved a foreign exchange student who had been kidnapped and attacked on December 16, 2007. Police responded to a call from a North Virginia Street residence, where the victim reported being accosted by a man in the apartment complex's parking lot. After knocking her to the ground and trying to choke her, the man covered her mouth and nose with his hand. She then passed out and came to as he was forcing her into a pickup truck. Arm across the chest, from one arm, and then the other hand cupped her nose and her mouth. She went unconscious shortly after that, most likely from being smothered. The next thing she remembers is coming to in a vehicle. With a hooded sweatshirt over her face, the victim couldn't see anything as the man drove away. He then stopped at a secluded area and attacked her while threatening to end her life if she called the police. After the incident, her assailant drove her back home. The victim managed to give detectives a description of her attacker. He was a Caucasian male between 20 to 30 years old and was somewhat heavily built, with noticeably thick fingers. She also gave police a description of his vehicle. Based on her observations, they surmised that it was a mid-2000s Toyota Tacoma 4-wheel drive pickup with an extended cab. DNA collected from the victim was submitted to the Washoe County Crime Laboratory. Although the police were unable to identify a suspect at the time, this evidence would later prove to be helpful in the Brianna Denison case as it matched the samples from KT's house. Detectives investigating Brianna's murder soon discovered 2 other possibly connected attacks. On November 13, 2007, a female UNR student was walking through the parking lot of an apartment complex when a man grabbed her from behind and began choking her. But this time, the would-be victim fought back. She began screaming despite her attacker's command to keep quiet, so he ran away in a panic. Again, police managed to collect DNA from the victim and stored it in their database. After the December and November attacks, police released a description of the suspect and his vehicle, prompting another female victim from UNR to come forward. Her story took place on October 22, 2007. Like the other UNR student, the victim was grabbed from behind and attacked. But this time, the suspect had a gun with him, which he pointed at her head. Unfortunately, investigators were unable to collect DNA from this particular incident. Still, the similarities between all three cases strongly suggested that a single suspect was behind them. And given that the DNA collected from the November and December 2007 attacks matched the sample found at KT Hunter's house, police knew that they were closing in on Brianna Denison's murderer. Even so, authorities still didn't have a suspect to compare the DNA samples with. All that would change on November 1, 2008, when an anonymous caller on the Reno PD's secret witness tip line informed them of a potential suspect in the Brianna Denison case. That man in question was James Michael Bila, who just happened to own a mid-2000s model Toyota Tacoma pickup truck with an extended cab. A former Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, James Bila was dishonorably discharged for illicit substance use in 2001. By 2002, Bila moved to Reno, where he was soon arrested for threatening an ex-girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. His ex-girlfriend then filed a restraining order against him, and he pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge in April 2003. The court subsequently sentenced Bila to alcohol counseling and ordered him not to have contact with the neighbor he attacked for a year. After this incident, Bila settled down to a quiet and peaceful life in the town of Sparks. He had a new girlfriend with whom he had a son, and he seemed to get along well with his neighbors. On November 7, 2008, detectives questioned Bila in response to the secret witness tip. He was noticeably nervous throughout the interview and refused to provide a DNA swab sample. Given that his physical description and his vehicle matched those provided by the victims of the 2007 attacks, detectives were certain they had found the man they'd been looking for. However, he denied any knowledge of the incidents and claimed that his girlfriend could provide an alibi for him for the night Brianna disappeared. As it turned out, Bila's girlfriend didn't vouch for him. On November 12, 2008, she told detectives that she couldn't account for his whereabouts during the December 2007 attack or the January 2008 abduction of Brianna Denison. Furthermore, the woman claimed that her relationship with Bila had become difficult since the fall of 2007. Around this time, he began leaving her and their son for several days. Some of these disappearances coincided with the times the attacks took place. She also testified how, shortly after Brianna's body was found, Bila left his job in Reno and took on a new job in Washington. He told his girlfriend that he was laid off, but she later learned that he quit. While in Washington, he sold his Toyota Tacoma pickup, although police have since recovered it from the new owner. What struck his girlfriend as odd the most was when she found two unfamiliar pairs of women's garments in his truck. When she confronted him about this, Bila refused to explain. It was at this point that Bila's girlfriend confided in her friend about her suspicions against him. This friend turned out to be the anonymous tipster who led investigators to Bila in the first place. The statements provided by Bila's girlfriend further reinforced suspicions about his involvement in Brianna's murder, but this wasn't enough to convict him in a court of law. What the authorities needed was physical evidence that placed him at the scene of the crime. That evidence came in the form of a DNA sample provided by Bila's own son. With the child's mother's approval, a saliva sample was taken from the boy and compared with the samples from the previous attacks. Lab tests revealed that the child was closely related to whoever had left the DNA at those crime scenes. This meant that James Bila was a definitive suspect in the 2007 attacks and the murder of Brianna Denison. This was enough to arrest James Michael Bila on November 25, 2008. Once he was in custody, authorities obtained a court order to have DNA collected from him. Finally, the test confirmed without a doubt that his DNA perfectly matched the samples from Brianna's abduction and the 2007 attacks. With these, Bila was formally charged with the death of Brianna Denison and attacking the foreign exchange student in December 2007. He was later charged with the October 2007 attack on the UNR student, the November 2007 attempted crime on the other UNR student, and the 2008 assault on Brianna. On May 27, 2010, after 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of all 5 charges. During his sentencing on June 2, 2010, Bila's attorneys presented mitigating factors to spare their client from the death penalty. They first claimed that their client experienced repeated abuse as a child. They also argued that he had been gainfully employed throughout adulthood and that he was consistently cooperative throughout his arrest and incarceration. Still, the jury denied the validity of these factors, and Bila was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Furthermore, Bila received 4 additional life sentences on July 30, 2010, for the October 2007 and December 2007 attacks. As of this writing, James Bila remains on death row. Brianna Denison suffered a cruel and pointless death at the hands of a vicious criminal who had no control over his urges. But perhaps one silver lining in this gruesome tragedy is that it has driven legislative action toward more stringent DNA collection. After Bila's sentencing, Brianna's family and other concerned Nevada residents lobbied for the passage of Brianna's Law, which requires felony suspects to provide DNA samples upon their arrest. Similar to New Mexico's Katie's Law, it mandates the inclusion of these samples in a police database to help identify suspects of past and future crimes. Brianna's Law was passed in 2013 and has led to the identification of over 1,000 criminal suspects and helped solve at least 9 murder cases. Since then, 31 states have passed their own DNA collection policies. As the most active advocates for DNA testing, Brianna's family has helped many victims of unsolved crimes obtain justice. Their efforts could also prevent many others from being victimized. While Brianna's Law won't bring Brianna Denison back, her family can rest assured knowing they've helped make the world a little safer for people like their daughter.